Warning, some viewers may find this video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Imagine life 100 years ago in Great Britain. The fields are clean, the rivers are sparkling, your day picks you up in a rowing boat. You have a picnic and then they take you for a drive in a motor car. Now isn't that pleasant? I think it is. Well then, this book is for you. This book is called The Wind in the Willows, and it was written by Kenneth Grahame, a banker from the UK who compiled the book out of bedtime stories he told to his son, Alistair, who inspired the main character, Mr. Toad. Now, Alistair was not a normal kid. He was blind in one eye and had several health problems, including probable bipolar disorder. The latter characteristic would be imported onto Toad. The book is about 4 animals, a mole, a rat, a toad, and a badger who lived near an English village in the English countryside. Now, 4 main characters is the perfect amount of main characters because the greatest unities in the world were quartets. I'm talking 4 seasons, 4 elements, even the most popular bands were quartets. The book starts with the mole slaving away with spring cleaning. It's always good to start stories off with someone doing a menial task, so they're more surprised when the action scenes start coming in. The mole eventually gets tired of work, as everyone does, and decides to have an adventure, which in my opinion is better than work and makes for a more interesting story. He finds a river which he and I think is the most beautiful thing in the world. He then meets the water rat, who asks him to come with him in his rowboat. The rat soon becomes the mole's best friend through his riz, and they have a picnic. And Ratty's idea of a picnic is the bee's knees and very catchy too. Hear for yourself.
Cold chicken, cold tongue, cold ham, cold beef, cold ham and cold beef, cold ham and cold beef, cold chicken, cold tongue, cold ham and cold beef, cold ham and cold beef, cold ham and cold beef, pickled gherkin, salad, French rolls or sandwiches, potted meat, ginger beer, lemonade. Cold chicken, cold tongue, cold ham, cold beef, cold ham and cold beef, cold ham and cold beef, cold chicken, cold tongue, cold ham and cold beef, cold ham and cold beef, cold ham and cold beef, pickled gherkin, salad, French rolls or sandwiches, potted meat, ginger beer, lemonade. Oh, stop! This is too much.
In the summer, they visit Mr. Toad, who lives in Toad Hall, an elegant riverside gentleman's residence. They meet the rich, enthusiastic, and haughty Mr. Toad, who is now into caravans after giving up boating on the river. He takes Mole and Rat out in his caravan pulled by his grumpy old horse on the open road, but gets knocked over by a motor car. At that moment, Toad switches his obsession to motor cars, which I think is because he wants only the most powerful machines in his possession, and because the caravan got destroyed, he now sees it as weak. Capitalist. Mole and Rat decide to leave him be. Later in the winter, Mole has a desire to go into the wild wood to meet the badger, but Rat says the wild wood is too dangerous. The Mole, being a stubborn little child, decides to go anywhere and gets jump-scared by the weasels who live in the woods and run a mafia. The Rat goes looking for him, finds him in the snow, and leads him to Badger's house where Badger heals them and formulates his plan to fix Toad, as he is too obsessed with motor cars. The Mole gets homesick because the Rat was always dragging him along, which is a feeling I've felt many times before, being a harlequin who always goes with the flow. The Rat gives in and leads him home, just in time for Christmas, where they give dinner to carol-singing field mice. In the spring, Badger carries out his plan to fix Toad. He, Mole, and Rat give away his car and take away his motoring clothes and lock him in his bedroom, which puts Toad in a terrible depression, which is what happens to me when I am separated from the things I am obsessed with. Even the Mole is sorry to have hurt his friend in such a way. The Toad fakes sick, which might be a symptom of bipolar disorder, and in doing so escapes his bedroom and steals the car which Badger gave away from different people, just like how I do anything illegal. He gets put in jail, which charges him 12 months for stealing and 3 years for furious driving, but 15 years for teasing an officer, and they put in an extra year in his sentence for being green. Now we know why it's not easy being green. This was the saddest part of the story, and I cried every time I read or watched an adaptation. But the jailer's daughter, who, despite the book being written in the early 20th century, is a very strong female character, frees Toad by dressing him up in her washerwoman aunt's clothing like a girl boss. By essentially becoming a drag queen, he gets past the warden, catches a train without a ticket by flattering the engine driver, gets a barge woman on his side by pretending to be like her like a harlequin, stealing her horse that previously pulled his cart, and hijacks a motor car by driving into the river where Brat lives, all while performing under his drag persona, a poor, unhappy washerwoman, and singing his signature song.
The world has held great heroes, as history books have shown, but never a name went down to fame compared with that of Toad. Mr. Toad, Mr. Toad, the clever man at Oxford know all there is to be knowed, but the none of them know is half as much as intelligent Mr. Toad. Mr. Toad, Mr. Toad. The animals sat in the ark and cried, their tears in torrents flowed. Who was it said there's land ahead? Encouraging Mr. Toad. The army all saluted as they marched along the road. Was it the king or Kitchener? No, it was Mr. Toad. The queen and her ladies in waiting sat in the window and sewed. She cried, "Look, who's that handsome man?" They answered, "Mr. Toad, Mr. Toad, Mr. Toad, Mr. Toad."
This is Wingstown, my favorite part of the book, and you can see why. This is also the reason I find washerwoman's funny. I also just realized that in my script, I spelled drag queen like how Edwardian Brits would spell it, with a hyphen between the drag and the queen. Toad enters Ratty's house, still in his drag persona, and Rat, Mole, and Badger explain to him that the weasels have taken over Toad Hall when he was away. Hashtag real political goals. They set up a battle plan to sneak into Toad Hall under a secret passage leading to the butler's pantry and attack the weasels with all their weapons. It succeeds surprisingly, with Toad swinging by the chandelier, singing his battle song, and killing the chief weasel by falling off and landing on him, which I thought was an epic power move and made it my power move because Edwardians have no sense of failure.
When the Toad came home, there was panic in the parlor and howling in the hall. There was crying in the cowshed and shrieking in the stall. When the Toad came home, when the Toad came home, there was smashing in of windows and crashing in of doors. There was chivying of weasels and fainting on the floor. When the Toad came home, bang! Go the drums! The trumpeters are tooting, and the soldiers are saluting, and the cannons they are shooting, and the motor cars are hooting as the Toad came home. Shout! Shout hooray! And let each one of the crowd try and shout it very loud, in honor of an animal of whom you're justly proud. When the Toad came home, when the Toad came home.
The ending is left ambiguous as to if Toad has become more humble, just the same a modest Toad he always was. The 1983 and 1995 animated movies and the 1996 live-action movie have said the latter, while the 1994 radio adaptation has said the former. Now, there were two stories that had no connection to the main plot and just served to give Mole and Rat more book time. Spelled like an Edwardian in my script again. The first one is The Piper at the Gates at Dawn, which they have to find the street, or in this case, country smart otter's son, was being captured by literal Pan from Greek mythology. I don't like it because it's way too ethereal and magical for the more realistic book, which I think was probably the reason why it's the title of Pink Floyd's first album. More on Pink Floyd later. The second is Wayfarer's All, in which the rat is possessed by a traveling ship rat and gains a desire to travel the world. I don't like it because Rat loses its maturity and leadership, and the setting almost changes outside England, which does not stay true to the original book. The sequel was written in the 70s by a different author called The Willows in Winter, which is almost the same as the original books, except it all takes place in winter, and Mole's nephew comes to visit. Now we'll talk about the several adaptations. Cosgrove Hall made a 1983 stop-motion animated movie, a TV show, and a sequel based on the book. It's very good with lots of realistic-looking backgrounds and characters, and the voice acting is marvelous. Richard Pearson delivers a youthful innocence as the mole, while Ian Carmichael delivers a performance as the rat that excels wisdom and calmness, even in dire situations. Sir Michael Hordern's performance as the badger was perfectly old and gruff, while David Jason's performance as the toad was the perfect blend of flamboyance and bipolar. His voice for Toad was very effeminate, which I love because I've always seen him as a dandy who has a secret feminine side. To be honest, all I want to see is Toad dressed in drag again. The voices for the supporting characters were a bit exaggerated, but at least they tried. It was later adapted into a TV show and a sequel with several literary and historical references that I didn't get until my teens, then spent long nights researching. I think this series is best enjoyed by classical literary nerds who love the Edwardian aesthetic and get all the literary references. The BBC made a radio adaptation in 1994 that's The Bee's Knees. It has dramatic delivery and grandiose sound effects and a flamboyant, effeminate Toad. Oh yeah! Although it does lose some points for including the piper at the gates at dawn. At least it was well acted, I guess. I think this series can be enjoyed by people who don't want to waste their time in front of a screen and who enjoy theatrical performances. A very faithful adaptation with animators similar to the illustrations of the original books with an all-star cast, including Michael Palin as Rat, Rick Mayo as Toad, Michael Gambon, God rest his soul, as Badger, and Vanessa Redgrave as the narrator, was released in 1995. Everyone performed beautifully. However, it does lose some points for including the two plot-relevant stories. At least they tried to weave it into the main plot. I think this can be enjoyed by people who really love the original book and want an adaptation that is the most faithful. In 1996, a comedic live-action adaptation made by the people of Monty Python was released. It was very absurdist, with the animals looking very humanoid because there are people in suits, and plenty of physical comedy and humorous, over-the-top, catchy songs that I really love. It starred Terry Jones as Toad, Eric Idle as Rat, Steve Coogan as Mole, Michael Palin as the Talking Sun, Anthony Sher as the Chief Weasel, and Stephen Fry as the Judge. Now, I didn't want to say this. It took me a long time for me to say this, but we need to talk about the last two casting choices. I'm sorry if you're offended by these movies. Just don't watch them. Stay away. As we all know, Sher and Fry are part of a chosen people that has been severely oppressed. And it's still going on even today. And as we all know, the Chief Weasel and the Judge are the main antagonists of the stories. I personally have a love-hate relationship with these kinds of casting choices. On one wing, I love their performances and think that the actors make these villain characters so much more fun and entertaining. But on the other wing, it just keeps carrying on a harmful stereotype that's been going on literally since the beginning of society. I have a friend from this group that, like me, thinks being evil is cool and is a huge fan of many villains. But it's a shame that they keep casting actors from this group as villains even now, where people should at least have common sense and treat everyone the way they want to be treated. But alas, some people still think like that, and it's up to us and them to either change their ways or punish them severely. No, and I'm not saying we should recast villains portrayed by actors of this group with the majority because it takes away diversity. The roles may be stereotypes, but at least representation was there. And yes, I am very upset about Israel getting bombed by Palestine, and I wish I could do something to help. And this won't be the only time I get dark and serious in this video. I think this movie can be enjoyed by people who love over-the-top comedy, but are mature enough to not be scared by the superhumanoid animals who can understand that harmful stereotypes about certain peoples being evil are not okay, that this is only pretend. Or it can be enjoyed by people who are super offensive to others, enjoy Pink Floyd, or want to be the one slur. Gives off the same vibes. So, of course, there are many other adaptations of The Wind in the Willows, but I won't have time to cover them all because then this video would take forever. So, to recap, The Wind in the Willows has an awesome story, fabulous Toad, and excellent and diverse interpretations. Sadly, Kenneth Grahame's son, Alistair, couldn't deal with his mental health anymore. When he was in college, he laid down on a train track beside the river where Mole, Rat, Toad, and Badger lived and let a train decapitate him. Suicide affects millions of people in many different ways. If you or a friend feel the same feelings as Alistair, call the number in the description and get help immediately before anyone ends up like Alistair. Rest in peace, Alistair, the one and true Mr. Toad. And rest in peace, Michael Gambon, the best badger anyone could ever ask for. Sorry it had to get really dark there, but these are important issues that were reflected behind the scenes of the book. Thanks for flying in, but now I've gotta fly out. Be sure to fly to the like and subscribe buttons, and have an awesome rest of your day.